When thinking about which technologies pose the greatest concern for me to the ethical conduct of warfare going forward, I have to answer artificial intelligence, not just because it's my area of expertise, but because of the nature of the technology and the foundational role it will play to other systems within the military, and the impact of unethical AI on the ability to be ethical in other areas of warfare. It's going to pose challenges to the ethical conduct at all levels throughout the process of the decision to go to war, as well as how a state will conduct itself during war.
I spent a lot of time looking at Cold War literature. Dr. Strangelove, On the Beach, The Bedford Incident, Failsafe. Very rich literature during the Cold War that wrestled with these ethical dilemmas. The principal one of which is the use of nuclear weapons. And now, in today's world, it's not just nuclear, of course. It's also cyber. We see a world today that has emerged in which the destructive power of nuclear weapons in the kinetic world is beginning to be matched by the destructive capability of cyber, which begins, of course, in the cyber sphere, if you will, but then has significant kinetic effect.
Over a 30-year military career, I had a chance to see a number of technologies come and go, and some of the ethical considerations with them. I would offer that as we enter in this age of AI and some of the new fast-moving technologies, that the challenges we have are not necessarily new, but we just need to think clearly about them. The two big areas, I think, of ethical concern fall in both the practical and the theoretical, with the theoretical being much more challenging.
Many of the opportunities that are currently presented to justify the implementation of artificial intelligence are in fact based off of hypotheses. For example, the idea that it will reduce civilian casualties. That is a hypothesis that is yet to be proven. And at the same time, there's growing evidence that AI is not necessarily all it's promised to be, and it's entrenching unethical behaviors and biases of humans in ways in the technology in ways that's difficult to combat. And withdrawing these technologies once they've been deployed is very difficult because once the genie is out the bottle, it's very difficult to get back in.
I think some of the practical matters will be worked through, and we actually have a pretty good framework for that. I think the theoretical is actually far more challenging and far more interesting. In an era of postmodern ethics, hyper-political decision-making, and religious indifference, I guess the question is, are we even going to be able to have a good and a reasoned discussion about morality, about what is good, what is evil, what is right, and what is wrong when it comes to behavior, especially in warfare? We're not talking legal discussions, we're talking about the discussions upon which laws are based on. I think Omar Bradley said it best as we entered into the nuclear age. He said that we are nuclear giants, but ethical infants. So the bigger question is, how are we going to avoid becoming ethical infants in the age of AI?
And an ethical question for us is, what are the values of these alliances, this garden that we've created that is our, in my view, greatest comparative advantage today? I think we need to tend that garden, and this brings us right back to ethics and values, because the way we tend that garden is by respecting the shared values between allies. And so we should consider, what are our values? I know what they are. Democracy, liberty, two different things. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of education, gender equality, racial equality. Look, we execute these values imperfectly, but they're the right values. And we share them with our European partners, with the Japanese, with the Australians, with the South Koreans, many, many others. And I would argue that the ethical underpinning of these alliances and how easy it would be to lose that is part of the novel 2034 and ought to be part of our conversations.
One of the biggest challenges here is the idea of accountability. Ethical conduct in war is based on the idea that there is an ability to identify where a red line is and hold somebody accountable when that red line is crossed. We need accountability mechanisms for actions taken by AI towards opposing combatants or non-combatants. At the moment, soldiers who engage in behavior that may be deemed as unethical can be called to testify and explain their actions. And we don't currently have suitable mechanisms for AI, nor for AI developers or deployers. But we also need accountability mechanisms for the soldiers who are told to rely on the AI system, and then it doesn't do what it said it would do. They need a method through which they can communicate that how they feel about that system and whether they believe its behavior is in line with how they would behave on a battlefield. So there's a number of these practical challenges that need to be addressed, and we're at a turning point where we're at almost this talk of an arms race that may push us to develop unethical AI if we don't slow down and address these practical issues. So that's why I would have to say artificial intelligence is my largest concern. And of course, the list is not exhaustive of these challenges, but those are just a couple of the examples.